A trend that I've found interesting over the past few years from Paradox Interactive is how it slowly decreased the amount of start dates in its games. When looking at the older generation of Paradox games, start dates seem to be boundless. CK2, for example, had almost unlimited start dates, with every day, month, and year for centuries being playable throughout the time period of the game. EU4 set up a similar standard, with thousands of different moments being playable during the game. I will say this is a bit of an overexaggeration. While those start dates were playable, they were not fully fleshed out like the few CK2 DLC start dates, 867, 1066, etc., or EU4 with 1444. These were start dates that were continually developed and specifically updated during the development cycle of the game, while most of the start dates that were playable throughout the time period, for example, from 1444 to 1821, were just basic days with maps being fleshed out. But even games like Victoria 2 had two start dates, 1836 and 1861, and Hoi 3 had many different periods and scenarios. Plus, older other Paradox games, such as Sengoku, had multiple different time zones. When you compare the start dates to newer Paradox games, CK3 only has two start dates, for example, unlike the higher amount multitudes playable from CK2 DLC and free patches, and the infinite scenarios unrelated to the updates that were just in the base game. Vic 3 only has one start date, compared to the two from Vic 2. Hoi 4 only has two start dates, when compared to the multiple from Hoi 3, and future other Paradox games, such as EU5, may only have one start date, unlike the multiple in EU4. Why would Paradox move away from more content, you may ask? There are a few major reasons that are obvious with some investigation. Firstly, the many start dates of EU4 and CK3 did not really work well. They were improperly fleshed out, were quite buggy, and were just mainly placeholders for a map. They did not work as the full start dates were meant to work out, especially the ones that were updated, such as 1444 for EU4 or 1066 for CK2, which had in-depth features. A second major reason that Paradox abandoned the multiple start dates is the time and effort it took to develop these extra start dates, especially when applied to adding new events, historicity, and proper characters and maps to the game. When a lot of times they didn't really update these start dates, and for example, a lot of the EU4 scenarios would break down and fall apart. Similarly, the initial development of one or two quality start dates for the release of games or updates with DLC is much easier for Paradox devs to create. For example, in the case of Vic 3. Instead of having to have multiple different scenarios, they only needed one base scenario of 1836, and they allowed players to expand upon that to their own will. This leads to my final point, the ability of start dates to be permeated and expand through games through mods. For example, especially in the case of Hoi 4 and CK3. The development of in-depth mods really helps expand on the lack of start dates and allows the player to play scenarios which normally would have involved in the older games, such as CK2 and Hoi 3, in much greater depth. For example, in Hoi 4, where there are mods for the modern era, or World War I, or even different World War II scenarios, overall, start dates in Paradox games have slowly trended down and away due to the amount of time it takes to develop them, the quality of the start dates slowly decreasing over time, and how modders can make better experiences so the devs can spend more time focusing on the base game features. I hope as time goes on, we can see the continued development of new start dates by Paradox, but I do understand the modders taking up the mantle in the meantime. Sincerely, Wonder Productions.